When Mia, a hardworking and loyal employee, pours her heart into building her boss Jason's tech empire, she never expects to be betrayed by the very man she trusted most. After Jason steals her credit, denies her well-earned bonuses, and leaves her humiliated, Mia decides she won't just quit, she'll take him down. Armed with intelligence, allies within the company, and a silent financial backer, Mia quietly begins buying shares of the company Jason thinks he controls. But just as she executes her masterful plan to expose his corruption and remove him from power, she discovers Jason has left behind a sinister trap, fake evidence framing her for embezzlement. As the scandal escalates, Mia must outmaneuver Jason's final desperate schemes while protecting the company and employees who believe in her vision. With each revelation, the stakes grow higher, and the line between victory and disaster blurs. Will Mia emerge triumphant and transform the company into something greater, or will Jason's final move destroy everything she's worked for? This is a gripping tale of betrayal, revenge, and justice where the tables turn in shocking and scandalous ways. When I was a kid, my dad had this saying, "Hard work and loyalty will take you far, Mia. If you stay true to yourself, the world will recognize your worth." I believed him. Maybe a little too much. That belief carried me through school, college, and eventually into the corporate world. When I landed my dream job at Jason Tech, a fast-growing tech startup, I was ready to prove myself. I was 25, full of ambition, and willing to do whatever it took to climb the ladder. Jason Tech was run by its founder, Jason Langston. Jason was the kind of guy you'd see on magazine covers, that a self-made tech genius, with a billion-dollar smile and just the right amount of charisma to make you want to follow him. In the beginning, I idolized him. I thought he was the kind of leader who cared about his employees, who valued hard work and passion. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first couple of years at Jason Tech were a blur of excitement and opportunity. The company was small enough that everyone wore multiple hats, and I thrived in that environment. I was constantly coming up with new ideas, taking on extra responsibilities, and making a name for myself as the go-to person for tough projects. Jason even started calling me his secret weapon. I'll admit, I felt proud. But things started to shift during my 5th year at the company. Jason Tech wasn't a scrappy startup anymore. We had grown into a mid-sized company with serious investors, big clients, and even bigger expectations. The pressure was mounting, and Jason, well, he changed. It was subtle at first. He started showing up to fewer team meetings and taking credit for ideas that weren't his. Then he started micromanaging things he didn't understand, creating chaos instead of clarity. But I kept my head down and focused on my work. Then came the Johnson account. It was the biggest project of my career, a multi-million-dollar deal that could take Jason Tech to the next level. Jason personally assigned it to me, saying, "I trust you, Mia. You're the only one who can pull this off." I should have been flattered, but something about his tone felt off. Still, I poured everything I had into it. For 6 months, my life revolved around the Johnson account. Late nights, early mornings, cancelled weekends, I gave it my all. I built the strategy, managed the team, and personally oversaw every detail. By the time we were ready to present to the client, I was exhausted but proud. The presentation was a success. Johnson Enterprises signed the deal on the spot, and Jason Tech secured its biggest client to date. The team celebrated that night, but I was too tired to join them. I figured I'd celebrate later when things calmed down. That celebration never came. A week after the deal was finalized, Jason called an all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of the room, beaming, as he announced the Johnson account as a personal victory. He talked about how he had personally guided the strategy and steered the company to success. I sat there in stunned silence, my stomach twisting into knots. Not once did he mention my name or acknowledge the team that had worked tirelessly to make it happen. It was as if we didn't exist. I confronted Jason later that day. I'll never forget the smug look on his face as he leaned back in his leather chair and said, "You should be grateful, Mia. This is good for the company, and what's good for the company is good for you." Grateful? I repeated, my voice shaking. "I worked day and night for that account, Jason. You didn't even mention my name." He shrugged. "That's how this business works. If you want recognition, you'll have to earn it. Now, if you don't mind, I have a meeting to prepare for." I walked out of his office, my blood boiling. For the first time, I started to see Jason for who he really was, a selfish, manipulative opportunist who only cared about his own success. But the real blow came a month later when the company announced year-end bonuses. I had been expecting a significant payout for my work on the Johnson account. After all, Jason had promised big rewards for anyone who contributed to the deal. My bonus? Zero. Not a single penny. When I confronted Jason again, he didn't even pretend to feel bad. "Budgets are tight," he said with a smirk. "You should just be happy you still have a job." Happy? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For 5 years, I had given everything to this company, to Jason, and this was how he repaid me. That night, I went home and cried. Not just because of the money or the lack of recognition, but because I realized I had been played. Jason had used me, taken advantage of my loyalty and hard work, and then discarded me like I was nothing. But as I sat there, staring at my computer screen through blurry eyes, a thought started to form in my mind. What if I didn't just leave? What if I made him pay? It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. About making sure that someone like Jason couldn't keep exploiting people like me. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but one thing was clear, I wasn't going to walk away quietly. After that night, something in me shifted. The hurt, the betrayal, it didn't just fester. It hardened into resolve. Jason had underestimated me, and that was his first mistake. I knew walking into work the next day that I had to play the long game. Jason was too powerful in the company for me to challenge him directly. If I was going to take him down, I'd need a plan, and patience. The first step was gathering intel. Jason liked to project the image of a successful, untouchable leader. He always talked about how Jason Tech was thriving, how investors were thrilled, and how we were on the cusp of greatness. But I had started to notice cracks in the facade. Delayed payments to suppliers. Unhappy employees quietly leaving. Rumors of missed revenue targets. I started paying attention to everything, company emails, financial reports, even casual conversations around the office. It didn't take long for me to realize that Jason Tech wasn't as stable as Jason made it seem. One night, while everyone else had left the office, I stayed late and accessed the company's financial records. I didn't break any rules, I had the clearance to view the files as part of my role, but I went deeper than I ever had before. What I found shocked me. Jason had taken out a massive loan in the company's name, far more than I had imagined. He was using it to fund flashy marketing campaigns, luxurious office renovations, and his own extravagant lifestyle. Worse, he had barely made a dent in repaying the debt. If our cash flow took even a minor hit, the entire company would be at risk of collapsing. It was a house of cards. And then there was the cherry on top. Jason had been quietly selling off shares of the company to cover his personal expenses. He didn't have as much control over Jason Tech as he pretended to. That's when it hit me. I could use this. Over the next few weeks, I started laying the groundwork for my plan. I began by saving every shred of evidence I could find, emails, documents, financial reports. I created an encrypted file on my personal computer and stored everything there. But I didn't stop with just gathering dirt. I needed allies. The first person I approached was Carla, the company's head of operations. Carla was one of the smartest, most capable people at Jason Tech, but she had been quietly sidelined by Jason in recent months. He didn't like anyone challenging him, and Carla wasn't afraid to speak her mind. We met for coffee outside of work one evening, and I laid it all out for her. "Mia," she said, her voice low, "if Jason finds out what you're doing, he'll destroy you." I nodded. "I know. But he's already destroyed me in every way that matters. I'm not doing this just for me, Carla. I'm doing it for everyone he's stepped on. For everyone he's going to step on in the future." She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup. Then she looked up at me and said, "What do you need me to do?" With Carla on board, things started to move faster. She gave me access to internal documents I hadn't been able to reach before and helped me identify other employees who might be willing to support us. One of those people was Marcus, the head of sales. Marcus was a good guy, but he was also frustrated. Jason had cut his team's budget, slashed their commissions, and then blamed them for missing targets. When I told Marcus what I was planning, he didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting for someone to stand up to that guy," he said. "Count me in." With Carla and Marcus on my side, I felt like I had the beginnings of a real team. But I knew it wasn't enough. If I was going to pull this off, I needed something bigger. That's when I started looking into buying shares. Jason Tech was still a privately held company, but Jason had sold portions of it to private investors over the years. Some of those investors were early supporters who were no longer actively involved in the business. Others were disillusioned with Jason's leadership and eager to cut their losses. I didn't have the money to buy shares on my own, but I had connections. A few years earlier, I had helped a wealthy family friend, Mr. Hayes, set up a custom app for his business. He had offered to pay me, but I refused, saying it was just a favor. We had stayed in touch over the years, and he had always told me, "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." This seemed like the right time to ask. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Hayes and laid everything out for him. I told him about Jason, the company's financial troubles, and my plan to buy enough shares to gain control. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "You're taking a big risk, Mia," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "But I believe in this company. I believe it can be great, just not with Jason in charge." He smiled. "That's what I like about you. You're not afraid to fight for what you believe in." Mr. Hayes agreed to back me financially, becoming a silent partner in my plan. With his support, I started approaching investors and buying up shares. Slowly but surely, I began to build my stake in Jason Tech. The whole time, I kept my head down at work, acting like nothing had changed. I still did my job, still attended meetings, and still played the part of the loyal employee. Jason had no idea what I was up to. But every day, I could feel the momentum shifting. By the time I had acquired 30% of the company, I knew it was only a matter of time before the scales tipped in my favor. And when that day came, Jason wouldn't know what hit him. The final stages of my plan required precision. Every move had to be calculated, every step carefully timed. By this point, I had acquired a substantial stake in Jason Tech, but I needed just a little more leverage to ensure Jason's downfall. And I knew exactly how to get it. Jason's arrogance had always been his weakness, and I intended to exploit it. He had been oblivious to the growing unrest within the company, brushing off complaints and dismissing concerns. To him, employees were disposable, mere cogs in his machine. But I saw an opportunity in that. Carla and Marcus helped me organize a secret meeting with several key employees, people Jason had mistreated, undervalued, or outright humiliated. At first, there was hesitation. No one wanted to risk their job by going against him. I stood up and addressed the group. "I know this is scary," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But look around you. How many of us have been overworked, underpaid, and taken for granted? How many of us have watched Jason climb higher while stepping on the very people who got him there?" The room was silent, but I could see the anger simmering in their eyes. I'm not asking you to stick your neck out, I continued. I'm asking you to believe that we deserve better. Jason doesn't value us, but we can take control of this company and create something better, together. One by one, hands started to rise. By the end of the meeting, I had their support. With this coalition of employees, I had another powerful tool: insider information. Carla, Marcus, and the others began feeding me intel about Jason's meetings, decisions, and even his personal plans. I knew exactly when he'd be distracted, when he'd be out of the office, and when he'd be most vulnerable. But the real game changer came from an unexpected source: Jason's assistant, Lila. Lila was a quiet, unassuming woman who had worked for Jason for years. She rarely spoke up, but she saw and heard everything. When I approached her, I wasn't sure if she'd be willing to help. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. Jason doesn't respect anyone, she said, her voice low but filled with resolve. Not me, not you, not anyone. If you're taking him down, I'm in. Lila gave me access to Jason's personal schedule, as well as a treasure trove of emails and documents that he had foolishly left unprotected. Among them, I found something explosive: proof that Jason had been embezzling company funds to pay for his personal expenses. Lavish vacations, designer suits, even the down payment on his second home, all paid for with company money. This was the smoking gun I had been waiting for. I compiled everything I had: the financial mismanagement, the embezzlement, the declining morale among employees, and prepared for the next step. With Carla and Marcus's help, I drafted a formal complaint to the board of directors. Jason Tech's board wasn't very active. Jason had always controlled the narrative and kept them at arm's length. But with the evidence I had, they wouldn't be able to ignore me. The complaint was sent anonymously, and within days, the board scheduled an emergency meeting. I knew Jason would try to spin the situation in his favor, so I made sure he wouldn't see it coming. While Jason was busy scrambling to defend himself against the board's questions, I was finalizing my takeover. With Mr. Hayes' financial backing, I had secured just over 51% of the company's shares. I was now the majority stakeholder. The night before the shareholders' meeting, I could barely sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, fears, and what-ifs. What if Jason found a way to stop me? What if the board sided with him? What if I had come this far only to fail at the finish line? But then I thought about all the people who had supported me: Carla, Marcus, Lila, and the dozens of employees who believed in my vision. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for them. The next morning, the shareholders' meeting began. Jason walked into the room with his usual smug confidence, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He greeted everyone with his trademark grin, making small talk and cracking jokes as if he didn't have a care in the world. When the meeting started, Jason launched into his usual spiel about the company's success and his vision for the future. I let him ramble for a while, knowing that every word would make what came next even sweeter. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Before we continue, I have some important information to share. Jason's smile faltered as I began to lay out the evidence. I presented the financial documents, the emails, and the testimonies from employees. I showed the board exactly how Jason had been running the company into the ground while lining his own pockets. The room was silent as I finished. Jason jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "Who do you think you are, Mia? You're just a glorified project manager." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm also the majority shareholder," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I'm calling for a vote to remove you as CEO." The room erupted into chaos. Jason shouted, the board members murmured to each other, and the other shareholders looked stunned. But I had done my homework. I had the votes I needed. When the dust settled, Jason was removed as CEO. His reign was over. I walked out of that meeting feeling a mix of triumph and disbelief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. But I knew this was only the beginning. Now that I was in control, I had to clean up the mess Jason had left behind and prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was capable of leading Jason Tech into a better future. Taking Jason down was supposed to feel like the end of the story, the climax where the villain is defeated, and the hero walks into the sunset. But life isn't a fairy tale, and what happened next was far more complicated than I ever imagined. After the board meeting, I assumed Jason would slink away in disgrace. His reputation was tarnished, his power stripped, and his secrets laid bare. But I underestimated just how desperate and dangerous he could be when backed into a corner. A week after the meeting, while I was sitting in my new office as interim CEO, Lila burst in, her face pale. She was holding an envelope. "Mia, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. I opened the envelope and found a stack of photos and documents. At first, they didn't make sense, random images of bank statements, company contracts, and personal transactions. But then I noticed the names on the accounts. They weren't Jason's. They were mine. My stomach dropped as I flipped through the pages. The documents made it look like I had been embezzling money from Jason Tech for months. They were forgeries, of course, but they were damn good ones. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. Attached to the documents was a handwritten note. "Enjoy your new throne while it lasts. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. J." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jason hadn't gone quietly after all. He had set a trap for me, and I had walked right into it. The timing couldn't have been worse. The company was still reeling from his removal, and I was working day and night to stabilize things. If this fake evidence got out, it could destroy everything I had worked for. I had to act fast. Carla, Marcus, and Lila rallied to my side, and together we started unraveling Jason's scheme. It didn't take long to figure out how he had done it. Before his removal, he had used his access to company records to fabricate the evidence, making it look like I had been siphoning funds into offshore accounts. But the most damning part? He had planted a digital paper trail that led directly to my personal bank account. "This is serious, Mia," Carla said as we pored over the evidence in my office late one night. "If he leaks this to the media or the board, they'll eat it up. He's trying to ruin you." "I know," I said, my voice tight. "But I'm not going down without a fight." I had one advantage: I knew Jason better than he realized. He was impulsive, reckless, and arrogant. He had never been good at covering his tracks. With Lila's help, I started digging through his digital footprint. It wasn't easy. Jason had grown more cautious since losing his position, but eventually, we found what we were looking for. Hidden deep in his personal email account were the original files he had used to forge the documents. Even better, there were email threads between Jason and a shady consultant he had hired to help him execute the scheme. It was the smoking gun we needed. But I wasn't satisfied with just clearing my name. Jason had gone too far this time, and I wanted to make sure he could never hurt anyone else again. Instead of going straight to the board, I decided to take a different route. With Mr. Hayes' connections, I leaked the evidence to a well-respected investigative journalist who had been looking into corruption in the tech industry. Within days, the story broke. The headlines were brutal. Ex-CEO of Jason Tech caught in scheme to frame successor. Tech Titan's downfall: how Jason Langston tried to destroy his own company. Revenge gone wrong: former CEO exposed in scandal. The media firestorm was relentless. Jason became a pariah overnight. Investors pulled out of his consulting business, and his few remaining allies abandoned him. But the scandal didn't stop there. As the journalists dug deeper, they uncovered even more dirt on Jason: illegal kickbacks, tax evasion, and even a secret slush fund he had used to bribe potential clients. The authorities got involved, and within weeks, Jason was facing multiple lawsuits and a criminal investigation. The fallout was immense, and Jason Tech wasn't spared. The company's name was dragged through the mud, and I spent months doing damage control. But as hard as it was, I knew it was necessary. Eventually, we rebranded the company, shedding Jason's toxic legacy and building something new. It wasn't easy, but with Carla, Marcus, and the rest of the team by my side, we made it work. But the biggest twist came 6 months later. One day, I received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short, chilling message. "You think you've won, but I'm not done yet. Jay." I stared at the letter, my mind racing. Jason was finished as far as the public was concerned, but I knew better than to underestimate him. He was like a snake, wounded, but not dead. I locked the letter in my desk drawer and vowed to keep moving forward. Jason might still be out there, plotting his next move, but I wasn't afraid anymore. If he wanted to come at me again, he'd have to go through the stronger, smarter version of me, the one he had unintentionally created. Because in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't taking him down. It was rising higher than he ever could, and knowing he could do nothing but watch.